Hi everyone, my name is Jenny, and in today's video I want to clear up 7 of the biggest luxury watch related myths, so you no longer have to be clueless when it comes to those 7 very popular misconceptions. So let's get started. The more jewels inside a watch, the better the movement. Though this one sounds a bit dated, it's still something you stumble across quite often, especially when watch manufacturers praise their movements on their website. So of course you start to think that the more jewels a watch has, the better or more precious it is. I mean, you can read all about how they are using 37 jewels, and it used to be something that was printed on most watch dials back in the day too. The purpose of these jewels is to act as bearings to various components in the watch, specifically the parts that make contact and would normally just wear down easily, such as the escape lever and the impulse jewels. So jewels in watch movements are still a necessity. So yes, admittedly this used to be an indicator of how precious or well-made watch movements were back in the day, but nowadays those rubies are made synthetically most of the time. Synthetic ruby is often made by simply melting aluminium oxide that contains a trace of chromium. The resulting crystal has the same internal atomic structure as natural ruby, as well as the same optical properties. They look nice, hardness and chemical composition. So yeah, though they are still very beautiful to look at, they're no longer an indication of the preciousness or quality of a watch. More important is the entire interplay of the movement parts surrounding it, including the rest of the watch, of course. 100-meter water resistance means you can dive 100 meters deep with your watch. Oh, this is one of my favorite myths, because I sometimes still argue with people about that. But once you hear, the explanation, it makes a lot of sense. All of your watches come with a water resistance. For some, very intense dive watches, it can go up to 3,900 meters, like the Rolex Deep Sea, for example. But there's also your, fancier dress watch with a water resistance of 3 ATM or 30 meter, like the classic Lange 1 from A. Lange & Söhne, for example. But here's the thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can take it down up to, 30 meters underwater or less, and your watch would still be okay. I would heavily advise against that, because those 30 meter or 3 ATM or 3 bar, however you want to call it, are in relation to the water pressure experienced in that depth. So here's a quick example. Let's say you're, sitting in a pool. You've got water up to your shoulders, so your hand with your wrist is fully submerged in water. And now let's imagine you're wearing a, Lange 1. So far, you're obviously not 30 meters deep down in the water, but when you start moving your hand around underwater, the pressure builds up for a brief moment, so you always have to keep that in mind. It is also visible in the formula for hydrostatic pressure, if we look at it. So P, which is pressure, equals fluid density multiplied with acceleration due to gravity, see, acceleration, and fluid depth, which tells you everything you need to consider when it comes to pressure underwater, really. It's why it's not recommended to take your 3 ATM, 30 meter or 3 bar water resistant watch swimming, because those have been tested in very heavily regulated conditions and not tested with you flailing your arms around underwater. And before we continue with some more myth busting, I want to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, CHRONEXT. CHRONEXT is not only one of the biggest pre-owned watch dealers with hundreds of different watches and offers online, but they also gave me a promo code for my viewers. So when buying a watch at chronext.com, you should use my code Jenny with an I, don't forget that, to get a sweet discount on your next watch purchase. I myself bought my Yachtmaster 37, the White Walkers I like to call it, from CHRONEXT, and I'm super happy with it. I just love it so much. They have in-house watchmakers who check every watch that is coming in and going out, so you do not have to worry about authenticity at all. They ship out watches to almost every corner of the world, but you can also, very conveniently use their worldwide pickup lounges if you want to. So make sure to use code Jenny on your next purchase from CHRONEXT to save money on your next watch. And now that we've got that covered, let's go back to those pesky myths. In-house movements are better. I know this one can lead to some very heated debates too, but it's actually rather simple and understandable if you stand back, and think about the bigger picture for a second here. Of course, in-house movements say a lot about a watchmaker's ability to create and innovate, but therefore stating that in-house movements are better is just way too black and white. Mass-produced movements from ETA or Sellita, for example, are used in numerous very prestigious watches from very popular watchmakers like Oris or Breitling, for example, mainly for the fact that they have been tried and tested for such a long time, for decades, making them one of the most reliable and, more importantly, easy to service movements out there. Since they are used so often and have been in production for so long, manufacturers like ETA or Sellita are able to eradicate most issues that are expected to occur with, relatively new movements. I mean, same goes for most industries. When a new technology is being introduced, like, in cars, for example, in which first series models tend to experience a lot more issues than the following lines. So, all in all, no, in-house movements aren't always better, as it is always influenced by so many other factors too. Sapphire crystals are unbreakable. I did hear this a lot in the beginning, and though I wish it was true, it's unfortunately not. Yes, sapphire crystals used in lots of luxury watches are more durable than, let's say, other crystals like acrylic or hard legs ones, but they are not unbreakable. I think what a lot of people do mix up here is that though they are not unbreakable, they are unscratchable. So yes, to a certain point, they will also shatter from a severe scratch, but that's it, they shatter before they scratch. This can be a good or bad thing, because with most acrylic crystals, you can, buff or polish minor scratches out, but you do have to swap out a sapphire crystal once it is damaged. Overwinding will break your watch instantly. Okay, listen. There are always layers to this statement, but no, overwinding a watch does not mean you will immediately break it, but I still wouldn't recommend doing it, so here's why. First of all, we have to separate manual wind and automatic watches. Manual wind watches have no rotor to, power up the mainspring, so you have to do that yourself by winding the watch up. You can also, of course, wind an automatic watch, but it will not, just run out of power when worn like a manual wind one, thanks to its rotor. When it comes to automatic watches, pretty much all modern ones can't be overwind. Watchmakers put fixtures in place that will simply decouple from the winding mechanism once the watch is fully wound. So you could technically wind the watch up for as long as you feel like it without adding any more energy to the mainspring. Why? Well, imagine the rotor, which constantly, keeps on moving while your watch is being worn, would keep on adding to the mainspring no matter what. I mean, you would break that watch in no time, which is why this sort of overwinding stop has been put into place. With manually wind watches, there's a different story. Since you are its only source of energy, you're also the one responsible for powering it up. So when you wind a manual watch, you will definitely feel when it's, fully wound by experiencing a very clear hindrance when trying to twist the crown further than it is supposed to go. I know that some of you might be scared, especially at the beginning, asking questions like, but what if I don't feel it? But believe me, as long as you're being somewhat careful, you will always know exactly when it is time to stop winding. Oh, and also let me add that you should still be careful no matter if it is an automatic or manual wind watch. Older models or less well-made watches, automatic watches, can be prone to damage too when, being wound up too much. So yeah, use your common sense here, and with most things in life, don't force anything. You can spot a fake watch from a mile away. Oh, sweet summer child. Long gone are the days in which fakes or, replicas were easy to spot. I know that some people who are just getting started are still under the impression that fakes are still rather easy to recognize, but unfortunately, that is far from the truth. I have already inspected some high-end replicas here on my channel, and if you want to learn more about them, I recommend, checking out the videos. I will link them for you down below in my description box. But what I can say is that it's really insane how far those replicas have come. Some even attempt to perfect the tiniest of details of a watch movement to make sure that they are super hard to identify, and most differences are only visible under an ultra-macro lens or if you have a microscope at hand. My best advice here is to make sure that you can trust the seller should you buy a pre-owned watch, or go the old school way and buy directly from an authorized dealer to make sure that you're not spending thousands of monies on a fake watch. Last but definitely not least, one of the juiciest myths that could actually, really be an entire video by itself. Swiss made is a statement that gets thrown around a lot, especially micro brands love to use it to make sure that, you know, people understand how high quality their watches are, because the world associates Swiss made, of course, especially in regards to watches, with one of the best of qualities. But listen, it really does not take a lot to call your watch Swiss made, and here's why. Officially, you know, and in some, the legal standard for the use of Swiss made on a watch are a very minimum standard, and the Swissness of a watch is largely dependent on, you know, the brand and its reputation. So according to Swiss law, it should be the following. A watch is considered Swiss according to the Swiss law if, number one, its technical development is carried out in Switzerland, and its movement is Swiss, and its movement is cased up in Switzerland, just cased up. The manufacturer carries out the final inspection in Switzerland, and just 60%, which is just a bit over half, of the manufacturing costs are incurred in Switzerland. Now, talked about the movement. A watch movement is considered Swiss if its technical development is carried out in Switzerland, and it has been assembled in Switzerland, and it has been inspected by the manufacturer in Switzerland, and the constituent parts made in Switzerland, excluding the cost of assembling them, represent at least 50% of the value of all the constituent parts, and 60% of the manufacturing costs are incurred in Switzerland. I know that was a lot, but still, it's important that we, you know, list everything. You see that it is not really a black and white issue, and there's a lot of leeway for manufacturers on how to interpret certain aspects of the requirements needed to call their stuff Swiss made. I've also found a very interesting side note that stated that more or less recently, I mean, the last time in 2027, efforts were made to strengthen the definition of, you know, Swiss made, but about 30 companies, 30, that wanted to remain anonymous, lobbied heavily against it. We still don't know who these 30 companies are. Apparently very influential companies. But yeah, I'll leave you to speculate about that in the comments. I'm very curious to see who you think could be involved in this. I would say that I can confidently exclude Moser from this, since they are super vocal about their efforts to strengthen the Swiss made label. Plus, they also come up with some really funny spots to promote their campaign. So yeah, I would exclude Moser, but I would be curious to know what you think, who else is behind all of this. So here you have it, 7 of the most popular myths about luxury watches and the actual truth behind it. If you have more myths you wanted to solve, then share them in the comments down below. And if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this one, I recommend subscribing to my channel. So I will see you in my next one. Bye!